Hello, people. Welcome to another edition of Dose of Drew. And tonight on Friday Night Knives, we are looking at the TRM Shadow. As I mess up the flip, as you can see, it's pretty good as far as the action. All right, first things first, though, let's get a couple of straight measurements on this one as far as our standardized measurements go. We are looking at just under 8 inches tip to tail and about 3 1/4 inches tip to scale. So it is pretty good as far as dimensions. It's right in that wonderful midline. We'll do a quick other thing. Total blade height at the highest point is right around 1.5 inches. It's about 1.5 inches. Approximately. It does taper down and all sorts of stuff, but a fairly tall blade with a nearly full flat grind. As you can see, see if I can get that there. There's a bit of there you go. There's the wonderful little grind line there. Still has quite a bit as far as cement goes. Let's get the weight on this because it is, I got all sorts of stuff on my scale here. It's actually not super lightweight, but it's not super heavy either. It's right somewhere in the middle, about a little over 3.5 ounces, 3.64, 3.65. I guess some of the dust off here, it might go up a 1/10 or 100th or so. So a little over 3.5 ounces, still pretty good, relatively slim. So you look and see the G10 scales themselves make the back spacer as it goes. There is, I don't know if you can see it, there is full nested liners, but they are not 100%. They just barely go through where you see the screws. It's not such a bad bit. And of course it has their river lock, which is essentially their crossbar style lock. Their, I want to say conic, sort of scaled conic thumb studs and crossbar ends, pull, whatever you want to call them. They are changeable. They are in. Those are essentially screwed together, which is nice. This has been used extensively by me as part of the testing. I have not cleaned it since I got it. So it is still running off of a tremendous amount of use. 20 CV is the steel. They are in the process of moving to Magna Cut, which will be an even better steel for this slim of a blade stock. In fact, let's take that measurement right now because it is famously slim, 0.0865. Pretty solid all the way. And behind the edge, I'll go here at the highest point, at the best geometry. 17 or so, 17.5 thousandths behind the edge is pretty good. That's not the thinnest behind the edge. It's definitely not the thickest, but for 20 CV, it's being right in the middle there, and as thin as the blade stock is, that's pretty good. It's not bad at all. It's, just under about 1 to 8 on there, so about height to all that. So not bad. Pretty good behind the edge. Let's do a couple of referential measurements here. This is the Paramilitary 2. As you can see, it has similar hand space and cutting edge to the Paramilitary 2 while being in a somewhat slightly smaller package, which is more compact or efficient, you might call it. It is just essentially a smaller package. Here's the Paramilitary 3. Again, similar hand space, but more, this is of course the Para 3 lightweight, similar hand space, but more cutting edge for the same bit. Just to give you an idea of the hand space there where that little beak is. It actually has a little bit more than the Paramilitary 3. Just the tiniest bit less than the Paramilitary 2. So it does fit very nicely right in between these two, with a lot of cutting edge and fantastic slicey geometry. Again, it's not the full flat, it's slightly higher than the Paramilitary 2, slightly taller, but it doesn't have as the full flat grind that the Paramilitary 2 does. So, but a much slimmer blade stock, so it still has ridiculously good slicing geometry even compared to some of those. And of course, it's just a blur, very similar in overall size, but a little more hand space, and not just any leak, but a random leak. Again, hand space is massive and blade geometry is fantastic. And I mean, overall length isn't that much different than either of these, right? It does sit right in between, but it is that's a good thing, right? Sitting right in between those is a good thing. It gives you lots of hand-filling knife in a relatively compact and pocket-friendly package. Couple of standards that everyone should know by now. The Benchmade Bug Out, very similar in size and a bit more usable hand space. And the Civivi Elementum. One of Civivi's great, similar hand space, better blade. Starting to see a pattern, I think. Similar, great hand space, more blade or similar blade in a smaller package. And of course, it's a little bit bigger than my Wiener, but I just like my Wiener better. It seems to have personality and tell a story. All right, so we'll get that done. Let's get to the damn nice criteria: the design, aesthetics, mechanics, noteworthy points, intended purpose, cost to value ratio, and expectations, and if there's anything I would request to make it damn nicer. All right, on the design, fantastic. This reminds me tremendously of the Nerd, but much, much larger, which is a good thing. It does have fantastic saber grip. There's no jimping for it, so it's not, and it's obviously not intended for supreme hard use. I would say it can do it, but 20 CV isn't the toughest steel in the world. It does have good corrosion and edge retention. And the neutral hand space, I have it is just enough for me to get 4 fingers in without using the choil to be able to bear down on this if I needed to get a good saber push or there we go, or do a double-handed push. Let me see if I can't fix that again. As I twack the phone too much. Good saber grip is nice, or the pinch grip is fantastic. It's just like the Nerd. You can get way up if you have to. It could be 20 CV, could easily be used for food prep. It has the corrosion resistance and plenty of edge retention, and it takes a very fine edge, which is important. It can take a very fine edge, and in fact, it can even be somewhat sharpened with aluminum oxide or ceramic stones because of the amount of chromium carbides that are in there. Excuse me for a moment. So, and I mean, the ergonomics are fantastic. That clipped, almost reverse Tonto style point gives you lots in the pinch grip. Even on the flat, I can almost get my fingers underneath there, not my thumb, but in a pinch grip. If I wanted to do this, I could do it, right? If as long as the thumb's up here, and then if I need to do score cuts, you can even get the 3 fingers, and it is pretty easy to get out there for some bits. Right, it really is. I can't lie. This is a package piercer. It has a fairly acute but robust tip. It is a shrink wrap slicer. You can get way up and have tons of control if you need to make those little tiny cuts in that hard plastic. Cardboard carver with this thin blade stock and high flat grind and nice and very nicely apex. This is a slicers, and it just tears through cardboard, and we'll go through a lot of it with this really great geometry. And in the reverse grip, it is actually really nice that the choil is a place where you can actually rest your finger, and you can easily get this to be an envelope eviscerator extraordinaire. So it does all of that stuff very well, and the design lends itself incredibly well to it. And the design also, I think, makes it look good. The aesthetics of this, it's a knife, but it looks different enough that you think it has a purpose instead of just being a pokey stabby thingy, pokey stabby slicey. And of course, the river lock, which probably needs a little bit of cleaning since I have been using it, just looking at how it bounces and sticks. You can get used to it, but excuse me. Pardon the cold, it is winter. All right, so and that's kind of the mechanics. It works really good. It is a fairly lightweight blade, but it does maintain a fair amount of strength along the ribs or the top edge there. It is knocked down, but not actually contoured or rounded too much. It's just the edges are knocked down, so they are not particularly sharp. It's much more like the stonewash finish on there, where it's just kind of knocked down around all edges. The back corner here is not, so there is the possibility that you can, if your finger is a little bit too big, you can nip it. Mine fits in there fantastic all the way up into the first knuckle before I start to feel that little tip. So if you have kind of sausage fingers, you might grab it, but it will fit most people quite well. And the river lock works really good. The crossbar locks are big nowadays, and it does work fantastic. Without a lot of the design issues you see on others where they have like kind of the overhang or a big gap. I gotta commend TRM on making it look like a regular folding knife while being a crossbar lock. One of the most notable ones being something like the Civivi Cuba that basically has a can opener here that's just sticking out ready to snag on something. And this really has no snag points. They're all rounded, curved, and flow nicely with the lines, which is actually pretty cool. And that really, the noteworthy part of this is TRM. They make really good knives, really thin blade stock. I'll come back to the Magna Cut comment I made before, so again there, but they have fantastically good knives. Relatively slim. Just to pull a known kind of thick boy out, we've got our Paramilitary 3. It's about the same thickness. Does that scare people? No, because there's other ones that like Paramilitary 2, same thickness. Get something that might be a little bit heavy, like a Rat 1. Rat 1 is significantly wider. Okay, so there's certain things that it's pretty standard. In fact, it's right there with a lot of classics as far as its I'm going to say width or thickness, length, height, width. So I'm going to go with width on this one. You can put in, but if this is length and this is height, then that's width. There's only 3 of them, so they all got to have a name. But the 4th is how it all moves from state to state. We'll just save the physics philosophizing, wait for later, because right now the noteworthy points is standard TRM features: extremely thin blade stock, ground to a very nice acute apex, great geometry because of the blade stock, very, very high quality machining. There's often a lot of titanium when it comes to them. So, there's TRM is actually started out as a titanium place. So if you haven't done that, by all means, go find their website, read their about and their stories, and learn a few things from the people who will tell you about themselves. They have a lot of their story printed out on their website, and it's fantastic. So definitely pay their website a visit. These they sell every knife they make and then some, and there's a waiting list. So if you guys are looking for this, the reason why I got the blue and the gray is because that's what was always left in about 4 minutes after they went on sale. By the time I could get it filled out and clicked, there was only the blue and gray left. You can always get more scales. They're not exactly inexpensive, but they're incredibly well done. Little bits like that, what do you call it? Like the sunburst or oyster shell, clamshell type machining on the pivot there. It's really quite amazing how nice these things are. Reversible deep carry pod clip. The single bane to my existence when it comes to TRM is this little loop right here never goes up enough. It is not up enough to catch jeans or anything that's necessarily thick. And I don't want it to be necessarily a ski jump, but having something that's just a little bit taller, like say this ProTech, that is thick enough for a jean hem to go into, can be very useful. It's just not that often that you see it that low, and it can be an issue. A lot on something this heavy, it can definitely be an issue. On some of their smaller, lighter knives, it's not so much an issue for me. I mean, something like a shorts, athletic shorts, or nylon shorts or anything like that, they go good, and it has a nice tightness. For something like jeans or sweats or anything that would be a little bit thicker fabric, it can be an issue. That's really the only complaint I have on that when it comes to the noteworthy points. It is reversible. It comes with a plug, so everything's nice and smooth, and you can remove it, of course. But yeah, that's really there. And part of what this is an EDC. TRM makes fantastic EDC knives. Their standard line, that isn't the Riverlock, is lightweight, slim, very, very useful. You'll find tons of reviews of their knives online, and they're all saying the same thing for a very good reason. TRM makes good knives, and they're unique enough with their thin blade stock and their geometries and everything like that. They quite often, honestly, remind me of pocket kitchen knives, the way that they're often designed. And that I say that as someone who owns lots of kitchen knives and likes the way they do. That is a compliment. Coming from me, it's intended as a compliment at least. So they have a lot of that, and it is an EDC beast. The 20CV has great edge retention and corrosion resistance. It's not the toughest steel in the world, but it's usually good enough for most EDC stuff as long as you're not chopping or you're not really ripping through cardboard and hitting like hardened staples or I don't know what. It tends to do quite well for EDC. The thin blade stock, high flat geometry, very slicey, incredible ergonomics that really lend it to all sorts of EDC tasks while being nice and, I don't want to say generic, but there's the only finger swell that kind of locks in your fingers is right between these two, right up on the choil or not. It kind of separates the two parts of the handle, while the rest is very open and allows for finger placement wherever your fingers fit as opposed to where this tries to make them fit. And that's pretty good. One of my favorites. I'm not a big fan of a lot of, finger wells or anything like that make me hold a knife a particular way. I like to be able to move around and use the knife as a tool in ways that make sense for whatever I'm using it for. And that's kind of what, as part of it's an EDC tool. It doesn't have super knife. It's not a classic shape. It has this really good downward cant that gives you a lot of finger space as you're moving through slicey or draw cuts or all sorts of other tasks. And it really does it well. And its cost to value ratio, it's not inexpensive. You're talking about a $200+ knife. Depending upon what you get. There's lots of stuff, and the price can vary depending upon handle, depending on when we get, and all that stuff. But there is absolutely nothing wrong, and TRM stands behind every one of their products. If you find something wrong, they'll take care of it. I've had nothing but fantastic interactions with TRM, both at customers through their customer service and just some back and forth emails I've had with people there. Absolute fantastic. They are incredibly nice, caring people. It's not a huge group of people, and they're very dedicated to what they do, and it's really hard to even complain. And they, that may or may not appeal to you, a relatively small U.S. company making their way with a small group of dedicated, passionate people, but I like that. It makes me feel better about what I'm doing and what I'm buying when I buy it. And that gives some value. There are knives that are built this well, but they just don't have the story behind it, right? There's other knives that you can find. I may even be able to find one sitting right here. Arguably, this is just as well made for what it is. Slightly cheaper. This one was about $160 with M398 micarta nested. You can find knives that are a little bit cheaper and built. The execution is just as good, but man, they're sublime. They're unique. The design is good. Made in the USA. You can get them with titanium. You can get them without. You can always get new scales. This is not one of the things that a lot of TRMs have is the ability to hot swap scales. The Shadow does not hot swap scales. Boy, that one is difficult. Hot swap scales. That one's a little bit difficult to say fast. Excuse me. So while the cost is up there, the value is too. So it maintains a decent cost to value ratio, but it's not cheap. It is not inexpensive in any way. It's just you pay a good amount of money for a great amount of knife. And that's important. Again, it's not the lowest cost of value. There's other knives you can get that are cheaper that will do a knife job. Just thinking one here. Similar type of capability, but a much lower cost to something like the CGRB Milea. Relatively thin, high flat grind, got a decent amount of belly, gives you a lot of capability for a lot less money. Again, AR RPM 9, good, decent edge, all sorts. A lot of the same things you can say about the TRM, you can say about this, except this is much cheaper and it just isn't as high quality. but it's still pretty high quality for a lot less money. So there's definitely better values out there. Let's just get that straight. If this is on the 1 to 100 scale, it's probably about an 80 on the value scale. While many other knives are higher, it's not that low. So it's still decent. But here's the thing, on the expectations, that's exactly what I expect. I have high expectations for TRM because they always seem to deliver. Not because of I heard this, but because I have other TRM knives and they are always fantastic. I've never had a bad TRM knife. I've called up customer service for other reasons, see if there's a way that I could get, scale swap on this. There's other reasons that I've talked to their customer service as well as other people at the company, but it has never been for a failure of their knives, which is pretty awesome to say as a customer and a reviewer. That's never been what the problem was. And so I have had high expectations. I expected it to tuck in nice, right? I expected this to be something that goes in well. The action is fantastic. I expected its mechanics to be good. I expected the design to be well thought out. I had high expectations of TRM, and they did not fail. This meets or exceeds every expectation I had of it, and I had high expectations for good reason. They deliver. And the only request I have is one that TRM is already working on. If you go on their website, they talk about they're switching all of their knives from 20 CV over to MagnaCut, which only makes sense for what they do. The thin blade stock, the high geometry and flat grinds they have on their knives, the fantastic sort of stuff, as well as an American-made, American-designed, and American-produced steel like MagnaCut, Dr. Laren Thomas, Crucible, all American with an American company. Definitely is something that's cool. 20 CV is made by Crucibles as well as an American company. There's plenty of other things in there when we start talking about it, but it's pretty cool. And so that would be the only request I have, and they're already in the process of doing it. Again, as I said, they sell every knife they make, every knife they can make, and then some. And so the process of them changing over their tooling, changing over their processes, making sure they get their heat treat or whatever they need to do to switch their entire industrial production process over to MagnaCut for all their blades, they're in the process of doing. So the only request I would have from them is something they are already doing. In case you guys haven't noticed, I really like this knife. This is actually one of my favorites. It's really hard not to complain about anything other than, man, this is so good. I wish it had MagnaCut. Because then I can get just about any handle. They have fat carbon, they have micarta, they have titanium. If I want a different handle material, I just got to go buy it. They have it, right? You can buy any knife and then get a new handle. They actually have them. So that's pretty cool. The other thing being, man, it's all American. It's hard not to feel just a little bit patriotic when you realize you're an American steel from an American company with American suppliers, right? You're kind of playing with the home team here, right? You're doing a little bit of scrimmage with the home team. It's pretty cool. Not that there's anything wrong. Again, as I just pointed out, I really enjoy the Fox knives with the Voxnays design. There's plenty of other manufacturers that are out there that I enjoy and like to support. Another American that I could put out here is Hogue. They do a fantastic job. And of course, the standard Spyderco, Benchmade, and all that. Ferrum Forge, another one I really like, especially with something like this where it's ProTech, and Ferrum Forge where it's two California, USA companies. I live in California. So, it's even nicer when I get to support some of the folks in my state that are still going strong, making knives for everybody. So that's always cool to be able to support. And yeah, this is out of Massachusetts. So what? It's not the same state. It's the same country. We all live in the same country. We're all Americans. And that's an intangible on this knife that's really, really nice. I'm not going to say it necessarily changes the score, but on an emotional, on a subjective level, to me, that is actually important that I have a chance to buy a good knife that supports American workers and American business. It's just really good to be able to do that. So to go back over this, the design, unique and fantastic. The aesthetics, it looks great. It looks like a knife, and it looks like a special kind of knife. It looks like something you want to use. The mechanics, my own inability to clean it or get it right, notwithstanding, it works fantastic in every possible way. Reverse flick, thumb flick, does it all. Just the plain old crossbar snap with the wrist, it does it. It locks up very, very well. It's really nice to see how well they've done with it. Noteworthy points are everything about it. It's a TRM. It's a river lock. It's got this thin blade stock. The things about it are its noteworthy points. It's kind of unique in that more and more manufacturers are coming around to this. But for TRM, they just do it on every knife. It's part of TRM's thing. And it's an EDC food prep. It is a companion knife. It's something you can take with you to perform everyday tasks, and it'll do pretty much most of those. Unless you're someone who does a lot of wood carving, you're running out in the woods, this knife will do most day-to-day light urban or light rural and most urban knife tasks, EDC knife tasks you could want it to do, and it does it well. It has a relatively high cost of entry, but you get value for every dollar spent, so it still has a decent cost of value ratio, and you should expect high quality and good execution of all of these designs, and it delivers. And the only request that I had would be Magna Cut, because number one, it's Magna Cut, and it's also a tougher steel for the thin blade stock and relatively thin behind the edge. It's not, I mean, there's been some that are in there 12, 13, 14, but there's also ones that are in the 22,000. So it's nicely in between there. So yeah, it's still pretty slicey and pretty good. And Magna Cut would do everything the 20 CV does and just do it a little bit better. It's maybe a little bit less on the edge retention side or about the same, better, believe it or not, better corrosion resistance. And we're talking 2 to 3 times the toughness of 20 CV. And on such a thin blade stock, that matters. And you'll get a higher HRC out of it to boot. It'll allow for, thinner edge geometries and all that stuff while maintaining good toughness, which allows it to do everything better. So I'm going to... On an objective scale, this is actually probably about an 88 to 90, but on a subjective scale, this is up in the top for me. This is 95 to 98. It really does it fits my hand fantastically. It is just about perfect in that mid-size. You guys have seen some of the others, so hopefully you understand a bit where my hand size goes compared to yours. The different ways you can grip this and utilize it. The thin blade stock, the incredibly slicey geometry of it is fantastic. And the overall action of it is just great. Believe it or not, as much as I hate to say it, the knife that reminds me of the action is the Kershaw Iridium. And it's very similar in its action in the way that it manipulates. The Iridium is a little bit heavier blade stock, so it has a little bit better fallback. But the overall neutrality of the action, this one came before the Iridium, so I would say the Iridium is more like this, but the overall neutrality of it is very similar, and it's very easy to control once you get used to it. So yeah, there's a lot to be liked there. So really high score from me, but if you're not quite as infatuated with it as I am, it's probably closer in the 88 to 90. A little bit is that cost to value ratio. It is a high cost to entry, but you get a lot of value. And that is the TRM Shadow. Fantastic knife from Three Rivers Manufacturing, threeriversmfg.com. I'll definitely try and put a link in there, or at least to their YouTube. I believe they have YouTube videos as well, so they have a YouTube profile. And, it's really good. Again, it is a package piercer, a shrink wrap slicer, cardboard carver, and an envelope eviscerator extraordinaire. Great action. It is damn nice and highly recommended by this channel, as are all of TRM knives. With that, I'm going to end this right there. It's a great knife from TRM. In my opinion, one of their best. Its biggest drawback for me is the weight, which is why I still like things like the Neutron and the Atom. Atom is probably my favorite of theirs overall, which is strange for a large knife. But the Shadow is nipping at its heels, and it's really hard to find something wrong with it other than the weight. So go ahead, take this video, watch it twice, comment as much as you like, be mindful of side effects. Remember to like and subscribe. This has been your Dose of Drew. I am said Drew, and you guys have a great rest of your night.